The way we view randomness has changed a lot since ancient times. Randomness used to be linked to fate. A dice roll wasn't just random, it was chosen by the gods. That's why the first dice were invented as divination tools. Ancient dice were used to gauge the temperament of the gods in fortune-telling rituals. Eventually, these dice were used for games of chance as well. Divination and games of chance were simply two ways to reveal what the gods thought. The link between divination and games isn't as odd as it seems. One facet of this exists to this day. Tarot cards and playing cards have the same origins, and the decks are almost functionally identical. But these days, one is used exclusively for gaming, while the other is used exclusively for divination. Dice have been the most important component in gaming for thousands of years, and arguably still are today. Dice have been reinvented time and time again, with the earliest dice being made out of the knuckle bones of cattle. They are in almost every ancient culture, from ancient Egypt to the ancient Vikings, and even in the Bible. Casting lots is a dice game mentioned in the Bible many times, and is often used for important decision-making, as a way to ask God for his input on a decision. The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. Proverbs 16:33. For example, the land of the 12 tribes of Israelite was divided with lots. In mythology, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades turned to lots to divide the world. Poseidon got the ocean, Hades got the underworld, and Zeus got everything else. Ancient people didn't just use randomness for religious decisions though. The ancient Athenians used random chance to choose people in some state offices. And they were seen as being equally valid as those who were voted in. It wasn't just convenient to say random chance had the authority of the gods behind it, but they truly believed random chance had significance. Today, we view random chance as being fair, but back then it went beyond fairness. It was backed by the divine. In Roman times, their dice were lopsided and irregularly shaped. They did this on purpose as a means of shaping fate. They had a fortune-telling system where they rolled multiple dice, and each collection of numbers had a fortune associated with it. By using lopsided dice, they were more likely to avoid the worst fortunes. This is fascinating since it means they had some knowledge about probability, yet still believed in dice as being fully determined by fate. And these dice weren't just used for divination, they were also used for games. Taberna, a similar game to backgammon, used the lopsided dice as well. But in games it was because lopsided dice were the culturally accepted way to make dice. They still believed fate would overcome the irregularities of the shape. But not all thinking from that time was quite so ungrounded. Aristotle wrote about probability and chance, not from a mathematical point of view, but from a philosophical one. Aristotle identified three types of events: certain, probable, and unknown. Unknown being anything random, like a dice throw. But Christianity couldn't accept that some events were unknown, because God knows everything. So when Aristotle's idea became popular in Christian circles, the church refuted them. Christianity was a big factor in how people's view of randomness changed in even bigger ways too. Not only did the church oppose divination as a pagan practice, but it also thought games of chance were a sin because the church had a very strict stance against gambling. Cards and dice were both seen as sinful things for a long time. See, if you believe random chance was divine will, then gambling is playing with God, subverting his will by asking him to reward greed. As one article puts it, it opens a void in the fabric of divine will. Because of this, playing cards kept getting banned, and at least 18 European cities outright banned them. But that didn't stop them from becoming more and more popular. It wasn't until the 16th century that mathematics were used to formalize probability and chance in these kinds of games. See, even though people were surrounded by random chance and probability, it took a very long time for mathematics to be used to describe them, and the advances that did happen were extremely gradual. Ultimately, it was in this time period that people stopped seeing random outcomes, like dice rolls, as being governed by fate, and started seeing them as just probabilities. And this transition happened largely because of gambling. Geronimo Cardano was a 16th century polymath and avid gambler. He actually made his living mostly off gambling, but he was a brilliant mathematician as well, and he realized math could be used to predict and describe random outcomes, like in dice or card games. He wrote a book, The Book on Games of Chance, about the patterns he learned from his gambling. He also wrote about a few ways to cheat at his favorite games, but it was mostly a treatise about probability. After this book, many of his contemporaries expanded on the subject. In Aristotle's teachings, the opposite of chance was necessity, but for modern games of chance, we view the opposite of chance as being player agency. See, when you stop seeing fate as being a factor, games that are entirely luck-based stop being interesting. So in order for games of chance to hold our attention, we've decided a player must have some say in how the game turns out. See, two things have happened because of this shift. One is that older games that used to be seen as purely games of chance, like blackjack, has seen its players develop an increasingly elaborate strategy to combat the luck involved and give its players agency regardless. These days, counting cards is a commonplace strategy. The second is that new games being designed center decision-making. Older board games like Candyland or Chutes and Ladders actually involve zero choices to be made. From start to finish, everything is determined by luck. But interestingly enough, that doesn't stop children from assigning meanings to these games anyways. While adults can see through it, children actually see dice rolling as a skill. And that's an instinct we aged out of largely because of the education we go through. Sometimes randomness is seen as something to be protected. In casinos, they go through great lengths to ensure their dice stay as random as possible to an almost superstitious level. Dice are machined to the 100th of a millimeter, their pips are filled with a substance the same density to make sure each face is the same weight. And then, after that, these dice are retired after only a few hours of use because wear might affect how the dice roll. Ultimately, randomness in most games designed today is seen as an equalizer. It gives less skilled players a chance to win and keeps games exciting for more skilled players. Every game has a source of uncertainty involved. A game with no uncertainty is just a puzzle. So designers today think a lot about how much uncertainty should come from randomness and how much should come from player interaction. And all this asks, will our view of randomness continue to change? And will it continue to affect the way we game? Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please subscribe. I'm still small, but hopefully people appreciate the quality and effort I'm putting into these videos. And eventually the YouTube algorithm will catch on and start pushing me out there more. I'm Jake Frondorf, and this is Cardboard Mountain.